Congress is finalizing some common sense steps which many people believe will help reduce unrelenting gun violence in America. This week, victims of the Uvalde and Buffalo mass shootings shared their stories on Capitol Hill as lawmakers debated gun control efforts. Even actor Matthew McConaughey, born and raised in Uvalde, shared his thoughts at a White House press briefing.
We need responsible gun ownership. Responsible gun ownership. We need background checks. We need to raise the minimum age to purchase an AR-15 rifle to 21.
But would these steps, including the possible banning of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, violate Second Amendment rights? Here to weigh in is constitutional lawyer, former Reagan administration official, attorney Jonathan Emord. Jonathan, it's good to talk with you. In his speech to the nation last week, President Biden said, quote, "The Second Amendment, like all other rights, is not absolute." The president quoted the late Justice Antonin Scalia, saying, like most rights, rights granted by the Second Amendment are not unlimited. Your thoughts on that one?
Well, the Second Amendment to the Constitution very clearly creates an individual right to keep and bear arms, as the Supreme Court found in the Heller decision in 2008. But it really means something so much more, and it's missed in this whole debate. When you take a look at what the Founding Fathers were trying to do, they were trying to protect individual sovereignty, our ability to protect our rights to life, liberty, and property, to protect a free state, as the Second Amendment says. It's important for us to understand that the Founding Fathers did not conflate this issue of law enforcement, that is, action against crime, and the right to bear arms. They understood that both could coexist. That's something that this administration doesn't understand, and it's a fatal mistake, because if you ban weapons, you simply make it impossible for the law-abiding to defend themselves, because those who are committing crimes already violate the law and certainly would not give up their arms or accept any restriction on their ability to use arms in the commission of crimes. And all these things would do is make it more difficult for people in the inner cities to defend themselves against rampant crime at a time when Democrats are pushing an agenda that involves defunding the police and a massive increase in criminal activity because they won't prosecute crime. So the Soros-backed DAs will clap to the hills if these measures are passed, because it means less ability for individuals to defend themselves against crime.
Well, we saw what happened in San Francisco with the DA there. There was a recall that was successful, so maybe they're going to be under fire. It looks like we'll end up with a new law, probably, that expands background checks, red flag laws, mental health services, beefed up security measures for our schools. Your thoughts on those measures?
These things are very dangerous because they intrude upon individuals' rights without due process of law. We're all entitled to a presumption of innocence. And under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, there must be due process before our rights to life, liberty, and property are taken away. Before you can take away someone's right to a weapon, you have to prove that those individuals are in violation of the law. And to otherwise create a prior restraint that blocks the law-abiding from having a weapon on various pretexts is not a good idea. In fact, it violates our rights, and it should be viewed as such. It's a gross infringement on our individual rights.
As long as you're with us, I've got to ask you about the arrest last week of former Trump advisor Peter Navarro. Now, he was cuffed, placed in leg irons at Reagan National Airport after refusing to comply with a congressional subpoena. And he claims the January 6th Commission has no prosecutorial authority. That's up to the judiciary. And then Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz says Navarro's indictment is unconstitutional because his claim of executive privilege should have been decided by courts before any indictment. So was Navarro's arrest political and unconstitutional? Were his rights violated? What do you think?
Political, and clearly his rights were violated, and the January 6th committee is clearly an unlawful committee. He's right. It is attempting to usurp the executive power by Congress in this instance, and it has no such power. It can't proceed in this way. The fact that the Justice Department acted without first going to court is a travesty, and it shows just how far the Attorney General was willing to go in pursuit of the political objectives of this administration against the prior administration. So it's a travesty of justice without question.
Well, you worked in the Reagan administration. Politics were a lot different back then. They were more civil. Reagan would fight political battles with Democrat House Speaker Tip O'Neill during the day and then share a beer with him at night. So are we now in an era when we use government to prosecute our political opponents? If so, how do we get beyond that?
We are in an environment of unequal justice where the Democrats seem to be able to get away with all sorts of heinous crimes, not least of which is the influence peddling that Joe Biden experienced as vice president and now indeed as president, with Hunter Biden continuing to be a patsy for the communist Chinese and to receive money for it. It is a situation that is unprecedented. They have become overtly socialist. And while that has been an agenda in the administrative state, perhaps since all the way back to the 1880s, it is nevertheless the case now that Pelosi, Schumer, and Biden have passed the proverbial Rubicon and have become overtly socialist and pursue an end of socialism regardless of the means, pursuing means that are really unlawful. This is something the Reagan people would never have countenanced. They would never have pursued a conservative agenda if it was unlawful. They honored court orders. They didn't disobey them. You did not see rife use of executive powers in a way that would create orders from the executive that violated the rights of, or violated the separation of powers and encroached on the legislative power to make law. Joe Biden does that with impunity. And as far as civility goes, I mean, the Reagan people were really the utmost in observing civility, as you pointed out, with Reagan setting the example with his interactions with Tip O'Neill. There's no need for this personal ruinous vendetta that they're pursuing against people who are their political opponents. Yet that is Pelosi's characteristic hallmark of action and has become the way in which the far left of the Democrat Party ordinarily operates.
Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing those insights. We appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.